Some names just stay with you. This is a tribute from Hollywood, where we pay tribute to American stars we've recently lost, alongside unforgettable figures from across the world. If these stories mean something to you, your being here matters deeply. There are faces that feel like they'll always be around. Darrell Sheets was one of them. He was 67. For anyone who spent evenings flipping through late-night cable in the 2010s, his face was unmistakable. Storage Wars had a way of pulling you in mid-scroll, and a lot of that had to do with him. The news of his passing traveled quietly but quickly, the kind of news that spreads because people know the name and remember the energy behind it. That he walked into those auction houses like a man who had already figured out the game. There was a roughness to him, an authenticity that didn't feel manufactured. He'd talk about uncovering rare comics, overlooked artwork, things others walked right past. Whether every detail checked out wasn't really the point. He kept you watching. He wasn't polished, and that was exactly why it worked. He reminded you of someone real, a buddy, a neighbor, somebody who put in the work, took his chances, fell short sometimes, but never stopped showing up. The years brought health challenges, stretches away from the cameras, all the weight that life quietly deposits on a person over time. Still, it always seemed like he'd lived several lifetimes before television ever found him. And now he's gone. It's a peculiar thing about people from that era of TV, they become reference points. You don't just recall them. You recall the season of your life they belonged to, the room you were sitting in, who was beside you. That's what stays. Not only who he was, but when, and what that time meant to everyone watching. Some voices don't just get heard, they settle somewhere inside you and never fully leave. Roberta Flack was that kind of voice. She was 88. The news came without fanfare, announced simply, the way her music always moved, no rush, no excess. For many, it arrived feeling less like breaking news and more like a long memory surfacing. If the early 70s are part of your story, you remember how the first time ever I saw your face seemed to suspend time itself. 1972, it wasn't just a popular song, it was something you carried. Then came Killing Me Softly with his song in 1973. That piano. That patience. She never wasted a single note. She understood silence the way most musicians never do. She wasn't chasing anything, not trends, not approval. She was classically trained, enrolled at Howard University at just 15. Serious about her craft long before anyone outside her circle was paying attention. When recognition did arrive, she didn't shift to meet it. She stayed herself. More milestones followed, Feel Like Makin' Love in 1974, another #1, more proof that tenderness could cut through noise and reach people in ways loud things never could. Away from the stage, she was known for her thoughtfulness, her privacy, her commitment to music education. She gave back without announcing it, just kept at it, quietly and consistently. And now she's gone. There's something about certain songs, they don't seem to age the way people do. You find them again years later and they feel waiting. Like they kept a place for you. That's where she lives now. Not frozen. Just still playing, somewhere just behind the quiet. Smokey Robinson carries his story in a way that doesn't need introduction. But it goes back further than most people reach. Detroit, the early 1940s. Not the version remembered from glossy album sleeves. This was something rawer. Smokey, born William Robinson Jr. in 1940, grew up in a neighborhood where certainty was a luxury few families could afford. His mother worked hard. His father was gone too soon. That kind of absence doesn't announce itself loudly in a child. It just settles in and stays. Music wasn't an ambition at first. It was shelter. He'd listen, absorb, sing with others on the block, voices weaving together until the world felt briefly softer. That's where it began, not on any stage, not in any studio, just a kid reaching for something solid in the middle of uncertainty. By the time Northern High School came around, something had changed. He wasn't just absorbing anymore, he was directing, forming a group, singing not for recognition but because it felt like a necessity. That group would become the Miracles. But none of it was guaranteed. People look back now and assume greatness must have been obvious from the start. It rarely is. Smokey and the group faced small rooms, closed doors, the slow grind of trying to get somewhere. He kept writing, songs that held more weight than his years should have allowed. And then came a meeting. Berry Gordy. No grand stage, just two young men with belief and almost nothing else. Motown wasn't Motown yet. It was a hope, fragile and unproven. But Smokey committed to it, maybe because he believed in the music, or maybe just because the music was the only thing that had ever made complete sense to him. Shop Around hit in 1960. Suddenly the reach wasn't local anymore. A voice came through radios across the country, soft, almost like conversation, and people paused a second longer because it felt human. Through the early 60s, he wasn't just singing. He was quietly authoring a generation's soundtrack, writing for the Temptations, for Mary Wells, for others who would become legends themselves. Smokey often preferred the space just behind the spotlight. But comfort doesn't protect you from cost. The higher things climb, the more there is to protect. And he was only just beginning. Fame didn't come crashing in for Smokey Robinson. It accumulated, song after song, line by line. By the mid-60s, he wasn't simply a voice on the radio anymore, he was the voice threading through dozens of them. Writing, producing, performing, helping define what we now call the Motown era. But at the time it was just labor. Long nights bleeding into early mornings. Studio sessions with expectations growing faster than anyone said out loud. Tracks of My Tears in 1965, that one didn't just connect. It sank in. There's a gap between hearing something and feeling it, and Smokey knew how to live in that gap. A smile with something unspoken behind it. Maybe that came from living, because by then life had grown more complicated than those early Detroit years suggested it would. Success deposits things on you. Pressure. Distance. Confusion about who you are when the lights aren't on. Still he pressed forward. Hits kept coming. I second that emotion. Tears of a Clown in 1970, playful on the surface, but if you listened differently, there was something heavier inside. That duality became his signature. Then came a decision that surprised people. He stepped away from performing with the Miracles. Not because he had run out, but because he was running low on something else, space, quiet, a life that wasn't always on display. He had a family. Obligations that didn't bring applause. But stepping away from a stage doesn't mean escaping yourself. Sometimes it puts you closer to things you've been managing to avoid. Through the 70s, even while guiding other artists and shaping careers within Motown, fractures were forming, not public ones, nothing the headlines caught. Internal. There's a chapter of his story that doesn't always come up quickly, maybe because it doesn't fit the image people hold of him, or maybe because it's uncomfortably familiar. By the early 80s, Smokey Robinson was living inside something he couldn't write his way out of, cocaine addiction. Not occasional, not controlled. Something that took its hold gradually and then completely. The kind that ignores your accomplishments entirely. And for a time, he disappeared into it. That part is difficult to sit with, because this is someone who contributed such beauty to the world, and behind that, there was a very real collapse happening. There were points where the story could have ended there, quietly, without resolution. But it didn't. Something held. A moment of recognition, maybe something close to fear, and eventually, around 1986, a spiritual turning point that he has spoken about since, not in rehearsed terms, but in the way someone speaks when they're still processing what almost happened. He walked away from the addiction. That wasn't the end of the difficulty, but it was the start of something more grounded, more honest. Around that same period, his marriage to Claudette Rogers, one of the original Miracles, a shared history that stretched back to the very beginning, came to an end, also in 1986. That kind of loss doesn't resolve quickly, especially when it's woven into who you used to be. But time kept moving, and so did he. By 1987, something quietly remarkable arrived, Just to See Her. A song that wasn't reaching for anything. It simply was, soft, direct, earned, and it brought him a Grammy. After everything, after the years of unseen weight and private struggle, he was still there. Still reaching people. That mattered. Through the 90s and into the 2000s, Smokey Robinson stopped needing to prove anything. His place was already written into something deeper than any chart. He became a living marker for millions of people who grew up with his songs playing in the background of their most formative years. Today he's still here. Still performing. Still carrying himself with that understated grace that doesn't demand attention but receives it regardless. There's a different quality to him now, a settledness, not born from everything being easy, but from having seen clearly what happens when it isn't. He speaks more openly about faith, gratitude, survival, not just the physical kind but the emotional, the spiritual. And if you listen, the voice still has what always made it worth hearing. Softer now, perhaps. Time tends to do that. But the feeling remains. For those who remember hearing his songs when life was just opening up, he represents something beyond music. He's proof that a life can bend and break and nearly vanish into darkness and still find its way to something real. Not perfect. But present. Still unfolding. Some names never occupy the front row, but they hold everything together from behind. Guy Moon was one of those people. He was 63. His passing was confirmed quietly, as it would be for someone whose work lived in millions of living rooms without ever being attached to a recognizable face. If you grew up with the television on in the late 90s or early 2000s, you absorbed his work constantly: The Fairly Odd Parents, Danny Phantom, Cow and Chicken, Johnny Test. Those shows had a particular pulse to them, a comic timing that didn't happen by coincidence. He had studied music formally, at the University of Arizona, long before any animation credits carried his name. Go back to those episodes now and you can hear it. The way a scene builds. The way a punchline lands a beat harder because of what's underneath it. And yet none of it was showy. He understood something essential: children absorb far more than they're given credit for: the rhythm, the tone, the unspoken signal that something is coming. He helped create that experience from a place nobody ever pointed a camera at. By most accounts he was reliable, professional, the kind of person a production depends on but rarely spotlights. No commotion, just consistent, careful work. And now he's gone. It's an odd kind of realization, how much of childhood is constructed not just from story, but from sound. From cues absorbed without awareness but recognized instantly, years later. His music is still there in reruns and in memory, in that half-second before a joke arrives and something in you already knows it's on its way. There are conductors who manage the beat, and then there are those who seem to shape time itself. Michael Tilson Thomas was the second kind. He was 81. The news came with a certain weight, not jarring, just final: the loss of someone so embedded in the musical landscape that his presence had started to feel permanent. For anyone connected to classical music over the past several decades, his influence was impossible to miss. San Francisco in particular. He became music director of the San Francisco Symphony in 1995, and under his leadership the orchestra didn't just play, it moved with intention, took risks, made room for American composers alongside the European canon. Some remember him earlier, in the 70s, stepping in last minute for Leonard Bernstein in New York, a young conductor standing before a major orchestra and holding it together with a composure that looked entirely natural. That moment followed him. He came from a musical family but built his own identity rather than borrowing from lineage. Whether leading Mahler or collaborating with contemporary voices who needed a conductor willing to truly listen before stepping forward, his approach was always his own. He was also an educator, the kind who could speak to an audience without any condescension, who made classical music feel closer, more accessible, more connected to real life. That work reached people who had never set foot in a concert hall. And now he's gone. There's something particular about the absence of a conductor: it leaves a silence, not an empty one, just a space where something used to give everything else its shape. But in an old recording, in a passage you've heard before, you can still feel the gesture of his hand. It's still there, moving through it.